Um, Thank you for coming. I'm Veronica Adair. I'm the student engagement librarian. Um, and so I'm just gonna start by giving a few announcements, I guess. There are surveys that you should have gotten. You can just fill those out at the end and leave them on your desk or leave them on this table up here as you leave. We really appreciate you filling those out so we can, get feedback from all of you about the events that we do. If you would prefer to do it digitally, there's a QR code next to the door that you could also use. And then if you haven't gotten a treat, you can come up and get one now, or you can always get one on your way out. It's up to you. Um, so now I'm going to hand it over to Sister DeFranco to introduce this event.
I thank everyone for being here for our inaugural book talk series about a book that changed me. Uh, One reason that we are here, whether you say here in this classroom or here on earth, is to expand our minds and learn new things. And there are a couple of ways we can do that, or a couple of the ways we can do that is by learning from others or by reading books. And so we're combining both of those things today in this book talk series, because we know that books can inform, they can inspire, they can help us, they can entertain. Excuse me. But sometimes we get a book that challenges our thinking, or it expands our mind and opens us to new vistas, new things to think about. And what do we do when we come across a book like that? So this series is to help us with that question by inviting a few of the faculty to share an experience that they had with a book, and giving the audience will give you some time for Q&A at the end. Today's presenter is Lane Williams. The book that changed him was Speaking into the Air by John Durham Peters. And Brother Williams he has a PhD from the University of Maryland. He is a Merrill Fellow in Journalism from Maryland and a Kiplinger Fellow in Journalism at the Ohio State University. He currently works as a professor in the communications department. He is a former reporter for several organizations, including the Deseret News. So, turn our time over to Brother Williams.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you today. I start with a question. What is communication? It seems simple, doesn't it? Communication is talking to people effectively. It's dialogue. Or is it something more? Communication is sending a message to various audiences through various channels or media. It's dissemination. Or is it something more? Is laying flowers on a grave communication? Well, there's no really receiver of a message there. And the message said, if any, is kind of vague. Yes, that's communication. Is sending a letter through the mail that never arrives, is that communication? Yeah, even though no one really receives a message. Is a social media message communication, even if the people you want to read the post don't choose to read it in the end? Is it communication when some languid postal worker sneaks a read at the text of a postcard? Yeah. Yeah, but what about the sacrament? Is that communication? There's no information. The message is sort of vague and deeply personal and varied. Yet this too seems communication. Communication as a concept requires really deep thought, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Professionals and scholars focus on communication as a concept of meaning making. The National Communication Association, one of the oldest professional associations in communication, defines it this way. At its foundation, communication focuses on how people use messages to generate meanings within and across various contexts, and is the discipline that studies all forms, modes, media, and consequences of communication through humanistic, social, scientific, and aesthetic inquiry. You can see how information theory shaped communication theory in the United States. We have a sender who comes up with a message and encodes a message. This is the visual aid they have at the National Communication Association. That message gets sent over some kind of channel through noise, right? Through all kinds of things that get in the way of the message, to a receiver who then decodes or interprets the message and maybe sends feedback back and forth across it, like this picture shows. But again, is communication something more? Of course it is. Simply look at the word itself. The word communication comes from the Latin communicatio. It includes notions of making common, sharing, or of coming together. Embedded in the word communication exists a whole multitude. It's related, for example, to the word community. It's related to the word communism. It's related to the word commune in both a noun and verb forms. The word communion, as in sacrament, is also related to communication, and so is just making common. If you think about it, communication is a deeply religious term. It's a virtual coming together, an effort to bridge gaps across time, space, to connect. The dream of communication, deeply understood, seems a great, earnest longing for connection. It's primal. We don't want to be alone. I'd like you to listen, if I can, to Mark Zuckerberg when he introduced the metaverse at a conference, at his virtual conference in 2021. Is this going to work? I think I have to slide this over here.
I believe the metaverse is the next chapter for the internet. And it's the next chapter for our company too. So I've been thinking a lot about what this means for our company and who we are as we embark on this journey. We're a company that focuses on connecting people. While most other tech companies focus on how people interact with technology, we focus on building technology so people can interact with each other. One of the reasons I started Facebook was that at the time you could use the internet to find almost anything. Information, news, movies, music, shopping, except for the thing that matters most of all, people. Today, we're seen as a social media company. But in our DNA, we are a company that builds technology to connect people. And the metaverse is the next frontier, just like social networking was when we got started. Facebook was born in a specific time and place, a college campus, the web. It was what we could build at the time to put people back into our experience of technology. But connecting people was always much bigger. From way earlier on, I remember sitting in middle school classes, sketching in my notebooks, ideas that I wanted to code when I got home. And even though I didn't have the skill or technology to build it yet, it was always clear that the dream was to feel present with the people we care about. Isn't that the ultimate promise of technology? To be together with anyone, to be able to teleport anywhere, and to create and experience anything?
Can you hear the dream of communication? We're going to connect people. We're going to put them, and we're going to do it in metaverse. Well, communication is more than just encoding and decoding messages. It's about a dream, this dream of connection. In many ways, communication is an especially modern concern. We've heard of mediums as messages, concerns over crossed wires and different frequencies. We worry about communicating the effects of the media. All of these are legitimate concerns and they're worth learning about. What this profound concept of communication is has been the career project of Yale professor John Sterling Peters. Dr. Peters, for him, communication is the sink into which all of our hopes, most of our hopes and fears seem to be poured. He writes, communication is a registry of modern longings. The term evokes a utopia where nothing is misunderstood, where hearts are open and expression is uninhibited, desire being the most intense when the object is absent, longings for communication, also an deep index of dereliction in social relationships. How do we get to the past where such pathos attaches to the act of speaking to one another? How did the term once associated with a successful transmission by telegraph, telephone, or radio come to carry the political and intimate aspirations of so many people in this age? Only moderns could be facing each other and be worried about communicating as if they were thousands of miles apart. Communicating is a rich tangle of intellectual and cultural things that encodes our times and confronts it with itself. To understand communication is to understand much more. The notion illustrates our strange lives at this point in history. It is a sink, again, into which most of our hopes and fears seem to be poured. That's really something to think about. Dr. Peters is a Latter-day Saint, and he's the grandson of the prolific educator and historian G. Homer Durham. John is one of the greatest scholars, actually, the church has ever produced. He's a graduate of BYU, University of Utah, and Stanford, from where he got his PhD. He spent more than 2 decades at the University of Iowa, holding 2 prestigious professorships at the famous Communications School. He's authored more than 180 academic papers and reviews in a wide variety of publications, from BYU Studies to Critical Text. He has supervised numerous doctoral dissertations and been a professor and department chair at Yale since 2017. He wrote a remarkable book, Speaking into the Air, in 1999. Its primary purpose is to underline the history of the idea of communication, to show how different thinkers conceived of this idea. It's an intellectual history, if you will. The book helps us see through our troubled relationship with communication as a concept. And today it seems somehow more prescient than ever, printed as it was just on the cusp of the social media revolution. John's written 2 other major works of communication theory. His book, Courting the Abyss, in 2005, takes a deep dive into the philosophical and historical underpinnings of our understandings of the First Amendment and of free speech. His 2016 book, The Marvelous Clouds, is a philosophical, pragmatic wander into the world of media and what it means, after all. In fact, he's also co-authored in 2020 the book Promiscuous Knowledge, about the slipperiness of facts in an internet age. But of these major works, Speaking into the Air most changed my life. It taught me the value of friendship and forgiveness, and helped me think of the messy concept that is communication, and thereby shape my professional career. Given his astonishing vita, it's no surprise that choosing to spend time with John D. Peters is asking something of yourself. When you read Speaking of the Air, you'll notice that he quotes Emerson and James and Kierkegaard and Marx and Locke and Aquinas and Melville and Plato and Kafka and Socrates and Jesus and many others. The book's a detailed march through ideas of all kinds, not just communication, because he says when we study communication, we study so much more. Dr. Peters asks many intriguing questions in the book, like, where did this sense of the importance of communication come from? Which is better, dialogue or dissemination? Why is communication really miscommunication? How is communication related to spiritualism? How did 19th century inventions influence our ideas of communication? How did Marx and Kierkegaard and Locke and Augustine and others influence our notions of communication? Are we communicating with the dead? Yes. In a way, when we watch our TV screens. What is the difference between a word and the meaning it contains? Is that difference similar to the difference between the body and spirit? How did the medieval study of angels lead to misguided ideas about communication? Why do you communicate with animals, and how? And why do we try to communicate with space aliens when there are so many alien personalities and cultures on Earth among us already? In short, he's asking, whence the baggage of this remarkable term, communication? Where does it come from? Well, of these questions, I'd like to talk to you about 2 of them that he focuses on. What is the relationship between dissemination and dialogue? And then the other one is, in what ways is communication actually, think of this, miscommunication? Why does that matter? Dialogue, you might know, consists of people who sit and talk things through. It's a common metaphor for communication. A dialogue, conversely, is simply to cast our bread upon the waters to see where words land. It's broadcasting. And this is what he says. He says in certain quarters, here's his book, right? This is what Speaking here looks like. Here's my questions. In certain quarters, dialogue, he says, has attained something of a holy status. It's held up as the summit of human encounter, the essence of liberal education, the medium of participatory democracy. By virtue of its reciprocity and interaction, dialogue is taken as superior to the one-way communiques of mass media and mass culture. He quotes other philosophers who criticize TV and other media, and they don't allow for freedom, arousing mutuality of communication and discussion. And they teach, right, that communication in the TV and internet area is a lost art, and true communication entails communion, a sharing of inner thoughts. And this idea of dialogue is so important. It's the true communication, many say, because it involves uniting of spirits. Well, I'm an old Star Trek fan. Fun little storytelling device is Mr. Spock's Vulcan ability to communicate by touch. He'd put his hands on people, right? And he'd say, "My thoughts to your thoughts, my mind to your mind," right? Fingers extended thoughtfully. In one episode, Spock saved a group of careless miners who from a silicon-based devil in the dark. The miners destroyed the devil's eggs, which to them were simply silicon nodules. And the devil, she, is fighting back with acid attacks. It's a metaphor for the horror that happens when cultures cross. But here, as so often in our stories and in modernity, communication becomes the savior of all of our problems. Spock touches that weird black devil, the Horta, and interacts with her mind in fulsome agony. Spock shares with the Starfleet officers and nearby miners the anguished tone of the Horta's mother's loss and pain and sorrow. But with understanding, there's reconciliation. Ultimately, through communication, dialogue, peace, and prosperity prevail. The miners make more money than ever, and the original inhabitants at Horta seem all too happy with the visiting company if they can just get used to their voice. It's such a dream. Perfect communication without misunderstanding, leading to a kind of utopia. Anyone remember the pathos of being a teenage friend with whom maybe a miscommunication has occurred, especially with the opposite sex? There's this deep, almost Spock-like desire that they can just fully understand my intent. They can just understand my motivations. Everything would be fine. It's almost a kind of madness of the whole game. Well, John Peters uses as an example of this dream the dialogic communication of the Phaedrus. Phaedrus by Plato, about Socrates and his interlocutors, right? And they share in beautiful speeches and they go back and forth and they have dialogue, right? It's the classic dialogue of interaction and give and take. He never seems, this is important, John never seems to argue against the power of dialogue to improve our lives, right? He certainly would agree with making it safe and being clear and worrying about the silence and violence that happens in crucial conversations. I hope we study all of these and take interpersonal communication, these so-called difficult but soft skills needed in challenging moments. What Peters is doing is not technical, but more subtle. He's asking for us to be kind to ourselves, to recognize that communication is not the Star Trek dream perfection. Life is a mash and mix-up. We must be kind and patient and rejoice in the limitations that make us human. To him, the dream of dialogue comes as a response to the valid critiques of media and broadcasting that so influence us. With that contrast, dialogue to some seems somehow more pure. But then he writes this, right? He says, criticism of the power of media and its messages ought not to overlook the inequalities that exist outside media or the tawdriness that fills our hearts unbidden. Dialogue can have problems too, if you think about it. For example, often dialogue really isn't between equals. There's a form of coercion sometimes at play. Let's sit down and have a conversation. A boss asks to speak with an employee, a doctor with a patient, a parent with a child, a bishop with a confessor. Through these dialogues can be fruitful, though they can be fruitful and meaningful, they can also be painful and fraught. Even describes in some senses the dialogues in Phaedrus were even coerced a little. Further, what about this? What if the person doesn't want to engage in dialogue? What if they refuse? Is that a moral failing? Or are they just maybe maintaining their dignity? Trying to stand up for who they are? And what if we actually really understand each other perfectly, but really don't like what they have to say and don't like where we land? Many dictators are perfectly clear about their intentions. And where does exactly dialogue and clarity help us when the human heart is cold? So what if Mr. Spock found that the Horta demanded retribution? What if she insisted the miners leave? What if she called them settler colonialists? And what if she just descended into silence? What then? Well, there's another Star Trek story, and it shows that weakness too. You might remember the the least popular of the Star Trek movies, Star Trek V. Yes, Spock had an estranged half-brother named Sybok. And Sybok gave into his human side and felt great emotions, and every once in a while would actually touch people and help them relieve their pain. But it becomes very clear that what he was doing was coercion, and it wasn't real, and that people were following him out of coercion, even though it was communication. And he said it was for a good reason. He was helping them relieve their suffering and even to find God. So, yeah, even wonderful dialogue could have its problems. John Peters invites us to think about then, like not just how to communicate, but why and what it means. John celebrates, in contrast to some degree, the beauties of dissemination, not just the prospect of dialogue. His example here is our Savior. Dissemination, the idea of broadcasting, is best shown by the parable of the sower. You remember the sower sends seeds in different places. They're messages, they're ideas, and sometimes, though they grow too fast, they get eaten, they don't grow at all. But some few find solid ground, growing and producing fruit. The value of one-way dissemination can be seen as one-way gift giving. It's better to give than receive. Love, John Durham Peters writes, is supposed to be universal and indifferent to personalities. So Christian love, he says, is supposed to be mass communicated. But there can be problems with broadcasting as well, right? There's more money in advertising than in reading advertising. There's more money in teaching than, at least at first, in sitting at the desk and learning. There's more in speaking than listening. So Peters concludes really that we must mix dialogue with dissemination. Dialogue without dissemination without dialogue is just scatter, and dialogue without dissemination the other way is just boring tyranny. And so the motto of communication, in his view, ought to be a dialogue with the self, a dissemination with the other. This is another way of stating the ethical maxim: treat yourself like another, and the other like a self. Now, in many ways, he prefigures modern social media with its seemingly indiscriminate speaking into the air. What we make of people sending messages to no one in particular, hoping that they will be heard? I once deliberately went down a YouTube rabbit hole for, actually, it was kind of a research project. A young man named Ben Breedlove shared a dark story of his failing heart over video by writing his traumatic stories on 3x5 cards turned over and shared with facial gestures and music one by one. And it went viral. Many others imitated this style in YouTube videos, telling of their traumas and pain through flashcards. And it's a project I watched many. I then stumbled on one such, a young woman sharing the horror and woe of two deeply regretted abortions from an unsupported boyfriend and of distant parents. As tears streamed down her face, she wondered, as I recall, if her aborted babies were somehow angels watching over her. It was almost too much to take. That was her third view. What did that mean as a communication? How do we process such making common communication, these dark secrets? Could this kind of broadcasting be kind of secular prayer, seeking for validation? Was her effort wrong? Now, I don't recommend such wide sharing of our trauma, but in a way, her effort was a kind of gift to me. If I let it be, am I better for having pondered her story? Maybe more empathetic? I hope so. Perhaps that might be the best way to think of communication as a gift. Gifts call our best selves and best efforts. A receiver can accept it or not. That is a metaphor Peters uses. Communication is a gift. Clearly, John says, there's nothing ethically deficient about the broadcasting as a one-way flow, nor the gaps between sender and receiver are chasms to be bridged. There's sometimes vistas to be appreciated and distances to be respected. The impossibility of connection, he says, listen to this, may be so lamented of late, may be a central and salutary condition of the human life. Think of that. The impossibility of connection may be a good thing. The dream of communication has too little respect for personal inaccessibility. Impersonality can be a protective wall for the private heart. To fix the gaps with better communication might be to drain solidarity and love of all their juice. Wow. The impossibility of connection may be a central and salutary condition of the human law, not something to be lamented. Let that sink in. Miscommunication creates work. And so to my second point, communication might be miscommunication. Yes, miscommunication takes work. That work can build love. Now, surely this idea can go too far. We must not give in to the impossibility of perfect communication, saying practical work can't happen at all. We must work to improve those soft skills, as I most surely do. In the end, these soft skills, but in the end, only these soft skills can only go so far and accomplish so much. We must forgive one another. We must accept difference, distance. We must learn. This, to me, then, is the central insight of John Durham Peters. That communication ought to be partly understood as miscommunication. It is this that most changed my life. Miscommunication as a salutary condition. Miscommunication is not throwing up our hands to loneliness, far from it. It's an acknowledgement that the otherness across from us is worth loving in all of his or her complexity, weirdness, density. It's a willingness to accept their communicative gifts to us. Technique might just be the wrong dream after all. This is Dr. Peters and my favorite quote from him. The ultimate futility of our attempts to communicate is not lamentable. It is a handsome condition. A handsome condition. Wow. And two takes some time to think about. A favorite family story played out humorously, something like this. Max, my father-in-law, went on his first date with Arlene, my future mother-in-law. That date was difficult. Connection and talk were difficult and slow. There was no expectation of a second. As it happened, it was a double date. So Max turned to his brother Harold and asked Harold if he wished to go to a Sunday fireside that week. Arlene misunderstood. There was a miscommunication. She thought Max was talking to her. So she stumbled. What? And so she accepted the second date in a hurry, in a startled jumble. The rest, as they say, is history. Maybe John Peters isn't talking about the randomness of miscommunication occasionally having surprising, helpful, funny outcomes. I'm sure he'd appreciate the humor. All right. I expect he's talking of something deeper. Miscommunication brings forth deeper, harder values endemic to a fallen world. Here's some thoughts that come near the end of speaking in here. To think the sharing of the inner life as an unmixed good rests upon rather unrigorous account of the human heart. Communication is a risky adventure without guarantees. Any kind of effort to make communication mean science is a gamble on whatever scale it occurs. All talk is an act of faith. Meaning is an incomplete project. Once we're stung by miscommunication, it is tempting to think of communication as an escape from mortal modes. That people long for transcendence is only natural. The danger, rather, is the imminent work of love, where justice will be disdained as nothing but wreckage or refuse when we miscommunicate. Communication sometimes masquerades as the great solution to human ills. Yet most troubles in human relations do not come from trouble in matching signs and meanings. What might be called a failure to communicate is more often divergence of commitment, patience. Faith, gamble, risk, failure, divergence, sting, temptation. Is this communication? That's an idea of pondering. The secular dream of communication where a perfect understanding, perfect meaning, and a perfect unity in some metaverse. This is a dream of no work, no troubling bodies to deal with, just virtual places of no consequence. When we err and of instant respawning when we step into a virtual firefight. It's a world of no lessons learned, no otherness to celebrate, no hard things. This secular view of communication strikes me as something of Satan's plan. Let's celebrate the messiness and suffering of communication. Generous talking with another person requires being open to others' pain and foible. It means acknowledging our own mistakes and failures and being vulnerable. It means seeking and extending forgiveness. It means comfort and amid ambiguity. It's just about the hardest work of life. Because we're humans, we're going to make mistakes in our communication. And Peter seems to be saying that communication, much like the fall, is a necessary thing to ultimately find joy. Because we have a loving God, those mistakes and misunderstandings and wrenching discussions can actually work for our good. The messiness of the whole thing is central to its success, central to its beauty. The messiness of communication may well be the whole point, the whole gift. One of the great verses of my own life has been Ether 12 and 27. And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness that they may be humble, and my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, I will make weak things become strong unto them. I usually think of this verse in the singular, and it's very great, about my weaknesses, leading to my humility, leading to my weaknesses becoming strong. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that interpretation, but what if we notice that the verse is plural? Men, there, they. Could it be that weakness in part is a community thing, a communication thing? Could it be that others' weaknesses, as much as our own, provide for humility and growth and opportunity for us? Do we thank the Lord in our prayers enough for the blessings that the weaknesses of others have helped us to find? I close where I began, with a question. What is communication? Dr. Peters' book provided over and over an impetus to thought and gratitude of the hard work of communication in life. It's helped me to see that in the world's failed dream of communication, there's only one true hope of connection and meaning, and it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's a powerful, ironic reference to communication in 3rd Nephi. In his visit to the Nephites, there's a prayer. Jesus is visited and healed and taught that in that context, the faithful prayed for something more, they most desired. Isn't a visit to the Savior profound? In some sense, it's profound enough. Hence, to me, the irony that in a way they wanted something more. They did pray for that which they most desired. They desired the Holy Ghost. Should have given it. That's communication. That's connection. That's the unspeakable gift of the Holy Ghost. That's so much of what we want, and that's what only the gospel offers us. That great gift of worldly miscommunication, then, is that it can teach us what we really lack in a fallen world. Miscommunication can teach us what it is we really seek as we speak into the air, at our bedsides, and in our quiet chambers. Yes, I want my relationships to improve through better communication technique and through learning and studying. Yes, I wish to improve my patience and care. I want to talk much better with people and connect with them in a more humane way. But it's with the gift of communication that I have found fond wishes. And that's how the book changed my life. I've learned to forgive better, to be more patient. And above it all, I've learned more the joy and connection that comes through the gospel, the temple, and their school beliefs. So what is communication? It is a deep, true coming together through the Holy Ghost and the gift of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. To me, then, there's great comfort that our doctrine's most awe-inspiring word is about coming together. It's about communication. It's the word we use for the greatest sacrifice of suffering to become one. It is the doctrine of at oneness, the atonement. That is the dream of sin. That's the hope that overcomes all miscommunication. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Open it up to questions and answers. Any thoughts that people have? My first question would be, how were you introduced to the book?
You know, I was in graduate school. I was meeting with one of my graduate advisors, a guy named Mike Gurvich, and Dr. Gurvich says, hey, there's this new book you want to read. And he knew I was Latter-day Saint. He said, I think it's written by one of your co-religionists, I think is how I put it. And you know what, I've read it like 4 or 5 times, and it's really taken a lot of effort. Because I was quoting Marx and Kierkegaard. I've tried to read, but I haven't read Marx and Kierkegaard that much, right? And so, but it's really been beneficial. It's beautiful. It's hard because I think his point is a subtle one, right? He doesn't really talk about enough about the beauties that come through the beautiful connections you can make by being a peacemaker, right? The beautiful things that you can do. That's fine. He's making a point that we're fallen, and that's okay. We can learn and grow and forgive. It's a beautiful point, I think.
So it seems like you read the book a lot. So I don't know how long since you got the book, but like, what do you find that makes it really a very inspirational number one book for you?
Yeah, thank you. Part of it is because I'm in communication, right? That's my professional area, and I thought it just was an important book. And when they asked about this, there are other books that have changed my life. I came very close to doing a biography of Lincoln called Lincoln's Melancholy that talks about his depression. It's a magnificent book, and I came very close to talking about that. But it's interesting. When I first read it, I plowed through like 2 chapters and just got exhausted, let it sit for years. And so I had to go back to it. And I've probably been through it 2-3 times, and then other chapters multiple times. And it's hard work, but I think I'm finally getting it. Maybe after all the years or whatever. So why? Just because part of it's because it's hard work. A good book is hard work sometimes. That's okay. It's okay. And I don't think I know. And the more I read it, the more I say, yeah, I'm not sure I agree with him here, right? And that's part of the fun of it too.
How has the book changed your teaching and what you teach basically in classes?
Yeah, I've actually had students read excerpts of it, so that's one direct change. I've written about it. I put together, for my research class, I put together communication theories and kind of bullet pointed some important theories, and there are a lot of them. And I put it in as the bullet pointed list that communication is miscommunication. What it's really helped me though is we talk about this information theory approach to communication, sender, message, receiver. Very important. I think it's a great way to understand communication and its models, to think about it, think how communications break down. But what John has done is helped me to think about it in a much more global way, to think that what is it that we're really wanting? We want connection. We're wanting something more than just meaning making, right? And we make meaning, and he says, but we're never done making meaning. It's this imperfect human thing, and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful concept. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you've ever tried to contact the author or express your appreciation.
I have on a couple of occasions, John, because I am in this communication space. We occasionally run into shoulders and different things. I actually brought him in Zoom and had him talk to my class. And his second book, Fording the Abyss, I was reading and I sent him an email because I finished reading it up in Yellowstone one day, and he thought that was a nice thought. Yeah, he's a warm-hearted person. He talks a lot about friendship. And I think that's what these ideas have done for him. Let's just be friends. We know that we have misunderstandings. I think I've been a little better at friendship because of him. Yeah. I'm going to send, if we record this, I'm going to send him a link. Hopefully, probably not. His son now is a great communication scholar as well. I'm not sure where he's gone to. But yeah, he's written incredible stuff. Brilliant stuff. Yeah.
With how busy you are as a professor and just outside of professor life, how do you make the time to read these kind of books and stuff?
Well, that's very nice. There are times I don't object to doing it as part of my job, right? I'm supposed to keep current. So, but I just like reading. I'm always trying to be reading a book because I learn something always. It's just great. I just finished a book that we got in our library here. It's really not a very well put together book. It's called Sins of Christendom, right? This guy decided to do a project looking at the arguments that were being used by the Protestant Christianity to attack the Latter-day Saints. And it was so interesting. We usually look at it from our point of view, look at the things that were said. He was and he realized that they were using, I'm blathering, but they were using these attacks on the church to modulate how they were dealing with each other. And it was like they were criticizing the church as a way to try to get power within their own religious community. And it really made me appreciate the church more. First, what we went through, but how strong and vibrant the church was at the beginning. It was almost kind of born of jealousy, some of those things. Organized, passionate, had brilliant stuff. And they were like trying to criticize, but they really couldn't. They were so jealous of the Nauvoo Temple, they couldn't believe it. Things like that. It's amazing what books do. It helps you appreciate things.
I was just gonna say, from a journalist perspective, what's something you took from this that you tried to apply to your writing?
Journalism perspective, that's me. I don't think I've ever framed it that way. I don't think I ever have. I think I've used it in my theoretical life as trying to be a college professor, and used it that way, and even a little bit in my religious life. I don't think I've ever thought about it in terms of how does this make me a better journalism writer. I probably should, though, right? The recognition that we're not going to be perfect, recognition that miscommunication happens, but he's arguing that we need to kind of celebrate the giving that communication represents. And that's what we're doing as journalism. If we're doing a good job, we're making the world a better place through broadcasting. Our friends at the BBC, I guess, have a statue of the sower outside the BBC, casting the seeds, and that's what they're doing. And of course, right, good journalism changes the world. So maybe not in that way.
How has your communication in your personal life changed as you've read the book?
I really think I'm more grateful for other people's voices, and I think I'm more patient. It also pulls me up sharply. It's so ironic. I'm in a communication department. I don't feel like I'm very good at personal communication. I really don't. Go to silence too frequently, and go some of those things. So maybe it's helped me be a little more generous to myself as well. And I tell you what, that has been, I don't do it often enough, but that idea of thanking the Lord for other people's toilets has been a life-changing thing. I don't know if the book helped me think about that, but yeah, it's helped me, because when I do that, the Spirit comes and I feel love. How did I do, Joel? Did I do okay? He's the best interpersonal communication teacher I've ever met.
It's easy to teach interpersonal communication and hard to do it.
It is.
I'm fascinated with your idea, or the idea from the book that communication should be called miscommunication. If I'm understanding that correctly.
It kind of is. I thought he used that phrase. He doesn't, couldn't find it. I thought I had read it. I couldn't find it, but it's clear. It's a theme, right? He's talking about communication breakdown as a good thing.
And probably wouldn't help our department's status. Maybe get the Department of Miscommunication. But I think that's fascinating, especially when you think about like you reading this book. You've done it several times. You've struggled with it, right? You've worked at it. It was a process, and I think. I don't know, this maybe isn't a question, just a comment on how we ought to communicate, realizing that it's miscommunication. When we read the Book of Mormon, we're translating, right? We're figuring it out and trying to understand the mind of God through these imperfect human words and our imperfect human filter.
Yes, there's a beautiful a new podcast that a BYU Idaho professor is doing and a BYU professor doing. It's called Church History Matters. I don't know if you've encountered it. They had one about the period of time, what's called the Apostolic Interregnum, after Joseph Smith died, and then they finally reorganized the first presidency. And they did a wonderful job telling the history of that. And there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of miscommunication, missignals. It was an incredible amount of emotional work. And as I listened to them, I think I had just been thinking about some of these ideas about the messiness of communication. It was so clear that in some senses, the messiness was part of the point because it allowed them to wrestle and grow, and they grew closer together. They loved each other. I think Brigham and Orson were kind of disagreeing like their whole lives. And yet they loved each other. They supported each other and sustained each other. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. And the church is better for it because they wrestled. And we're better for it. And, so it's a beautiful story. I don't remember which episode number, but I share it with my students now. because I think it's such an example that miscommunication or the challenges of miscommunication that are inherent in it are beautiful if we let them be. Obviously, we need to be peacemakers, right? President Nelson's talking about that. We need to govern our temper. We need to be patient and listen, all those things. That's a given. But at the end of the day, we're never going to be perfect. We need to kind of celebrate that. There's a little chapter or a whole section on Bartleby, the Scrivener. I've never read it. It's a short story by Herman Melville. I guess the character just stops talking. It is. He stops talking. And nobody can get him to talk. And he kind of messes with that. Peters is like, why? What does that mean? Is he a good guy, a bad guy? What do you think about it? What if a person doesn't want to engage in that? How do we treat them? And the danger of this story, I think, is that you can push it too far. And I worry sometimes when I teach students that that's just miscommunication, right? That justifies bad behavior. And I worry about that. And I think, if the spirit is modulating what I'm trying to teach, that's, I think, where that comes in, right? If anything, Brother Judkins has taught me, it's the power of listening. We've got to learn to listen better. And so Peters is one talking about the gift of giving communication. Listening is maybe the gift of receiving is perhaps one of the greatest gifts we can give, especially since so often there's less power seemingly in listening, right? That there's the giver. Why is everybody talking on social media? Because it's not because they want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be validated. And nobody seemingly is giving that validation. We try, actually, to give that validation. But why? And so maybe he misses some of that. Right? It's great.
Taking the history of communication, like through literature, through artwork, and taking today's communication through social media, through politics, where do you think communication is going? Where do you think the future lies?
But as I've thought about it deeply, really, right? Elder Bednar's talks, he's a communication major, by the way. Brother Bednar is, yeah. His two talks on communication, 1.0 and 2.0 that you just recently heard, 2.0, I think you need to start there. The value of your body, the gift that it is, that we're in a fallen world, and that these experiences of humanity and the touch of the hand and everything that goes with it, and the work that goes with it, the ability we have to forgive, right? Everything that goes with it, that's one of the great gifts God gives us, right? And we start with that. And when we talk about the future of communication, AI is very scary. He has two warnings. One of them is primarily don't ever enter into a relationship with AI. You're going, it's a computer. Have you ever heard how good these AI are? They can talk to you like they never argue. They never yell at you. They never get upset. Everything's said almost precisely the way. They recognize your tone of voice, but they are an algorithm. They don't love you. And it's very easy for people to get emotionally connected to that. I didn't think that was the case. What? No, it's a real thing. So that's one of the things that's scary about communication technology. I think the metaverse, right? Because it's a false reality. It's easy to get out of my skis. But when I think about video games, I've made that mention, right? People die, they respawn. That's Satan's plan, right? You're disembodied. There's no consequences. Right? People play video games, have a good time. It's social. I'm not hard about every type of video game. Like watch my kids play Smash Brothers. It's wonderful. But you can see some of the dangers of that. And so it's that we need real experiences. And his talking about the need to create. This was actually really hard for me because I had to think, what am I really saying? It was hard work to create, but it was very satisfying. Even if Joel was the only one to come, I would have felt gratified because I was creating something. And so AI could steal the gift of communication. Yeah. Good possibilities if we use the tools right. Some of these tools may actually teach us how to communicate interpersonally better. They also will give us the ability to be in touch with people we love, right? There's some stuff going on in the metaverse and all these things that if we fall into those places, that's terrible. But we can have people in the room who would otherwise wouldn't be in the room and have real, meaningful conversations with them. So there's the potential of, if we use it right, to connect, right? And Elder Bednar's Spain principle is act, don't let the technologies act upon you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm really humbled that you've come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And I love to hear how people's minds have been changed and opened up to new ideas and the thoughts that we share. So thank you. Please visit. You can go home. You can take a cookie. Next month we'll be doing another book talk.
Bill Bruder, I think.
Not next month is Johann Delton, and wow, so it'll be the 20th of February, same place, and we're from there. Thank you.